you nervous?
I had to get the class ring too.
Of course. You nervous?
Absolutely not. I'm a regular Twitch streamer, so.
All right, then you should be just swell at this. All right, so we're live. Hello, everybody. I'm Weebo Jones. Duh. This is my guest, Crater Bob. Say hi, Crater. Bob.
Hi, everybody.
Bob or Crater? Babe.
Either or. One's a nickname, one's my real name.
Okay, gotcha. I guess I'll just go with Bob because Crater sounds weird. I don't know.
Yeah, seems the way everybody goes, unless they've met me before and they know what my head did to a dumpster, and then they stick with that one.
Mm-hmm. That's fair. Indeed. So, ladies and gentlemen, please mind the cat. But she's decided not to leave me alone for the evening, which I'm perfectly fine with. I hope the audience is okay with it. I hope you're okay with it, Bob, because
absolutely
she's a very needy little girl. So we're here today to discuss a question, and that question is traffic stops versus domestics. Which is more dangerous? Did we want to limit this discussion to just cops, or did we want to broaden it to just in general what's more dangerous?
I mean, as someone who's worked in the field of security, private security, as well as corporate, I think we can broaden the scope a little bit. I know I've had a few close calls. Not
to worry. I did kind of keep it limited to just for cops in general, but we can definitely broaden it because I know the domestics, at least the ones that if we limit it, or no, if we don't limit it, I'd say to just those that are police calls, not the unreported ones, because that does kind of take us out of our scope, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it's more domestic abuse that gets unreported at that point. Yeah.
All right, I gotta ask you to settle yourself in that direction, dear. You're distracting me. Sorry.
Hi, kitty.
She's
a gorgeous cat.
She is, but she's so needy. So this all stemmed from we owe the audience. Okay, she's back. We owe the audience a little bit of an explanation as to how this came about, and I actually have the clip pulled from the video that I just did last week, where I made this following claim. And if I did this right, it should be super easy to hear it. Oh. Is that flickering for you?
I see a buffering wheel, and okay. I guess I have to hit play on my end.
No, I have to hit play, I think.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure. All right, here you go.
I have a visible play button.
Let me know.
Okay, yeah, that brings it up. Yep, go.
It should be noted that in our training, and probably in officer training all across the nation, it is drilled into our head that traffic stops, felony or otherwise, were the most dangerous calls to go on. And so protocol, at least in my old department, was to double up on these calls whenever possible. So that was the claim that I made during my video. Now, I am perfectly open to adapting my thinking on this, because keep in mind, this is me quoting my police exploring advisor from, I guess, it's got to be like 4 years ago now that I stopped being a police explorer, because you stop being a police explorer around 18, 19. I gave up my uniform rather recently, to be quite honest. I was a little bit lazy about that because I was just always out of state. But typically, what was quoted at us was that traffic stops were the most dangerous ones to go on. And the reasons that we were given was because there's just so much broad applicability, I guess, that encompasses a stop like that. You don't know what you're getting when you pull someone over a lot of the times. Even if you have some sort of identifying information, like a license plate, it could be, a stolen license plate, or the car could be driven by someone who's not registered to that vehicle, or the registration could be not up to date, or the license plate could not even be in that database. Because keep in mind, I believe not all states keep a license database of other states, like out-of-state states. Like, I'm pretty sure, and
I do have a point to that.
I'm not 100% on this, I'm pretty sure like California doesn't have a registry of Illinois license plates, if I'm not mistaken.
No.
No,
However,
that is
they
the
would
case?
have access to like a nationwide database, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm
But
speaking.
how accurate is that, though?
I'm speaking on that as someone who went through a 911 emergency call center communications course, and basically through the course of that, I ended up getting 3 different APCO certifications, the Association of Public Communications Officials. It's actually telecommunications, but it doesn't make sense for the acronym.
Mm-hmm.
But the long story short is that within the 911 centers, which are different between Canada up here and the U.S. down there, they do have a certain amount of access to like a nationwide database. It just depends on where you are. And with California, I'm not sure what kind of access they have to, say, Illinois or Indiana or.
So there is a nationwide database. It's just a matter of how much access a state has to it. Okay.
It's basically like CPIC up here in the NCIC.
That does make more sense. Okay, gotcha. See, I'm coming at this from the perspective of someone who spent a day at a dispatch center, whereas you didn't have a little bit more time than I did. Oh.
I got maybe 10 minutes in my professor's call center in Oshawa, Ontario, as part of the Durham Regional Police Service. They've since moved it to Whitby, and now they have their own building as opposed to just a third of the top floor of the 17th precinct. They just have a whole 2-story building now right next to the shoot house, which my professor likes to make the joke. Her PSAPs have to state on the call now. Not honestly, but sometimes they do. Yeah, if you're hearing gunshots on our end, that's just the guys next door practicing. We're sorry. We don't want you to think we're at war.
That's fair.
Fair.
So the other points that I have regarding my position on this and why I think that I don't want to say it's a more true statement to say that there, but why I think that traffic stops are more dangerous is because there's a lot of lack of information, right, and broad applicability, and the sheer frequency that police go on traffic calls, just traffic calls, not necessarily felony traffic stops themselves, but just traffic stops is staggering. I believe
it can be.
I think of the 53 million total interactions in 2015, right? We have 19.2 million of those being actual just interactions with drivers, just the drivers during traffic stops. That's a hefty amount. That's about 8%.
Right. There's a lot of other factors to take into account on those traffic stops. Like with the cops pulling someone over, they do what's called the safety zone, where they park a little into the traffic.
Yes.
And
it creates kind of a buffer between their walking zone and traffic.
It can, and that's the thing too, because if someone steers into that safety zone, that's an instant charge like that. It just goes to show that, this person literally had to steer past the cop car and into the police officer themselves. And, that can be an ambush charge right there, depending on where you are.
That too. And I know for a fact, at least it was the case when I was on ride-alongs in 2000. Oh gosh, was it 2019? I spent an entire month.
That was a bad year.
I was on ride-alongs at some point in my college career. So within the last 4 years, I believe I was a sophomore in college. And for an entire month, that was all that I did, was just go on ride-alongs, all the different shifts. And one of the things that I learned while on a ride-along was that not only do police officers double up on shifts, just to kind of act as a second set of eyes and, a second gun in case it was necessary for
instant backup. Yeah,
exactly, instant backup purposes. But also it had the added bonus of, if anyone didn't slow down and get over into the next lane, if that was a possibility, coming up on a traffic stop, it could have been an instant ticket for them, because you can get ticketed for not complying with
failure to yield.
Exactly, failure to yield. And if you're having a slow night, some cops will do that just to kind of keep people on their toes, keep people on edge. But it is a safety concern, just from a a positional standpoint of I could get hit by oncoming traffic on the interstate, on a side road, it's dark out, visibility can be low, whatever. You can get hit by a car. And that's just before you even get to the actual individual that you are, giving probably not a so good night.
Well, I mean, chances are, even out on that dark road, it could be ages before you get a passing motorist. And sort of a funny, not funny story on that. When I did my placement in my course back about 2013, it was with OnStar at the Canadian office, the one office they have in Oshawa, right next to the GM headquarters. And I remember one of the advisors that I was sitting with, an emergency advisor, told me a story of a time where one of the GM vehicles had actually gone off a cliff and landed in a tree. So it was sitting in the top of a tree all night. And so what ended up happening was the 911 PSAP, the local one, to the crash, contacted OnStar and said, "We're having a problem finding your client here. Can you tell us where they are?" So they basically told the PSAP, "All right, where are your units?" And the PSAP's like, "Okay, well, they're here. They're like at the bottom of the cliff, but they don't see anything. We have them right at the bottom of the cliff, right off of where you told us the driver is, but we don't see a car anywhere." So the advisor says, "Okay, look up." And sure enough, never mind, we found him. Good night.
We got this.
Yeah, don't worry, the person lived, by the way. Just
That's
kind
good.
of
That's
good.
good.
To a happy ending, yeah.
So I don't know how to transition from that.
It is kind of a mental roadblock telling that story. It just puts everybody against the wall like, wait a minute, there was a car in a tree. Yeah, no, I have heard the horror stories about OnStar, to be honest. So if you have one, let it fly.
I don't. I sorry. Wish I did, because that sounds like a fun time.
It kind of was. After I did the placement, I did 6 months of employment there in the subscriber department, during which time I also trained for the emergency department, which was the original plan. Got another APCO certification out of that. And Aditya Berlin Minix, if you're listening, I still need that certificate. It's been 8 years. Send it already.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I have 4 APCOs and only 3 certificates, so I'm a little mad about that. But yeah, the 6 months I did in subscriber, it was interesting to say the least. There were times where I actually did have to transfer calls to emergency. I remember at one time I got this call. All I could hear was this woman yelling at this guy over the button, and it turned out it was a domestic, so I had to shift that over to sub. So I put it on hold, shifted it over to emerge, and they picked it up, and I came over half an hour later, and they said, "Don't worry, yep, the cops got there. She's fine. He's going to jail." That's the end of that. So it had its exciting moments, but there were just some moments in subscriber advisory. You just have to go, what? Like, you're getting the directions directly to your car, and you still don't manage to follow them. You call back half an hour later, and you're lost again somehow. And then there were people that would want to go a specific way, so there was all kinds of rerouting you would have to do through the system, and it was just a nightmare. But I digress. So,
to the point of going on calls for domestics, obviously, when you are getting a call for a domestic, as an officer, I recall from my days sitting next to in the passenger seat of police officers, I do recall a lot of the times they would give you a lot more information on the specific house individually, because dispatch centers do have a sort of collection of data, or at least there is a memory of that house, because more often than not, if you get called to a house for a domestic, it's not the first time that there's been a domestic at that residence.
Frequent flyers, yeah.
Yes, they're frequent flyers, and that makes them kind of a more known entity than just any random car that could be passing through town. Might live here, might not live here. You've never interacted with this person, most likely, in your entire life. But, like I said, domestics are more frequent flyers to a smaller pool of police officers.
Just to speak to the 911 centers on that one, sometimes they will keep a record of each address's calls on a database. It just depends, because when you call in, it goes through straight to the 911 center unless you're on a cell phone or calling from voice-operated internet protocol phone. So, like Skype, Discord, that kind of deal. In which case it comes in over an administrative line, and then they don't know how to find you. And with the cell phones, it will ping off the three nearest towers and triangulate, and up basically at that point, they're literally asking where you are. When I was in the course, one thing they really drilled into us was the first question you ask is not what is your emergency, but where is your emergency?
Yes.
And that was for the point of if a call drops from a cell phone or power goes out and your cordless phone just dies like that, or you're on a, like Skype or whatnot, then at least then, if the call drops, they get the address. Yeah, they have a location. They can send out an officer for an unknown trouble, and then just go from there, and then figure out if they need to go fire, medical, police straight on. So yeah, when you call in, the number's going to drop a whole bunch of information onto their computer-aided dispatch program right in front of them. So it'll have the address, it'll have the known tenant on file, the known phone number, which would hopefully match the number that's calling in, but you never know. And then sometimes, like I said, they'll have some history of the residents or the caller themselves or the number. And
what kind of calls have been associated with that residence, that number, that person. But like not just that bank of information, also you have the luxury of asking the person calling in any additional questions, potentially, assuming they're free to. Like, for instance, is there a firearm on the premises? Is there some sort of violence? You can actually sometimes hear the other person on the other end of the line gauge exactly their level of volatility before you get on the scene.
Yeah. Sound cues are very important.
Yes.
That's one thing they taught us big time, was to always listen, and just listen to that background. You never know what's going on. And there's actually a really great video game that came out a few years back, 911 Operator. And they actually threw a call into the game that one of my teachers had actually brought up when we were going through the course. And basically this woman called 911 for a man in her house, and she acted like she was calling a pizza place.
Yes.
So she fooled the guy into thinking that she was calling the pizza place, and the PSAP figured it out right away and just started asking the right questions. Next thing you know, cops are at the front door. Boom, guy's done.
And he was none the wiser.
No, not at all.
Hello there.
Hello
so that
again.
is an added advantage of the domestic disputes. Now, on a traffic stop, like I said, you don't have nearly that level of ability to gauge information based off of a license plate alone, because it's not talking back to you.
Not necessarily, no.
Yeah. So you only have the conversation with the individual that you're pulling over, and they can lie to you. It's not like you're helping them in that. You're hindering them, essentially, as the officer on scene. So they're not going to be super. Okay, yes. If it is a vehicle not a vehicle inspection, but a vehicle assistance call, that is a little bit different. But generally speaking, when I think about a traffic stop, when I'm talking about traffic stops, I'm thinking about them as you're pulling someone over because they violated something.
Okay, so you're not talking about like a called-in vehicle. Like sometimes it can be called-in vehicle, like somebody will spot a drunk driver or see a weapon in a vehicle. But I think what you're referring to here is the on-the-spot officer spots the vehicle and signals pull over, right?
Well, no, actually, what I was discluding from this pool is like, say you're pulled off to the side of the road on the highway and your hazards are flashing because you're out of gas or whatever. Those I'm not so much including in this pool, although they definitely do have their place in the statistics.
They can fall under ambush. I can see where you're going there.
They can, but I'm opting to disclude them.
Okay.
Just for sake of simplicity, I guess. But there's
keep it simple. There's another S in that, but yeah, no, I don't like to call names, so
Ow.
Not you specifically, of course. Oh, yep, she's being a little bit on the needy side again, but
yeah, she is. So that lack of information, that is definitely a hindrance. You don't know who it is that you're interacting with until you identify them, and that does take a little bit of time. You have to gather information. You have to get their ID from them. You have to get, their, it depends on the state, but either insurance or registration for the vehicle. Sometimes you're comparing what you know to be the VIN against what it is that you see to be the VIN to make sure that, hey, this all adds up, the registration matches. And you have to do this all while you're interviewing the suspect or the
subject is a little better.
The subject, probably. Yeah. You have to do this all while you are interviewing the subject. You're checking information, cross-referencing it, and keeping an eye out for any possible dangers or hazards to yourself, not just with the subject, but also with the rest of the roadway. So you are constantly on edge.
Right.
As an officer. And that is nerve-wracking, and it can put you on, a little bit
alert
of a nerve
mode,
style. Yeah. Yes, exactly. And that twitchiness can be a danger to the subject.
It would definitely tip
just as much as it can be a danger to the officer. I mean, if someone is nervous around you, it kind of tips off the other person a little bit. Ow. Sorry.
I think she needs a little bit of a clipping.
Yeah. It can tip off the person that something is awry and perhaps send them into a more aggressive spiral, shall we say.
Sort of like the Dante Wright issue last week there, yeah.
Yeah. So that's another reason why I think just the consistent amping of emotions in that situation. I mean, we're already at a domestic situation. We're already going into it thinking, yes, everything is, bro, we are in a volatile situation, but a traffic stop can go either way. It can be easy breezy lemon squeezy, or it can be not that at all. And really the chances of it being that or not that are crapshoot. I mean, the video that I was responding to, the Windsor traffic stop, that didn't start out as a high intensity situation.
Yeah.
Honestly, if you ask me, I don't think it should have gotten to the point that it did. I think there was definitely room for de-escalation before they even got up to the guy's door.
Yeah. I definitely expected better of Gutierrez on that one. He dropped the soap big time.
I know.
Yeah.
And you would think that an experienced police officer would be able to control his emotions, but that did not happen, obviously. Yeah. I mean, the man's fired now, so.
It just turned into a dick swinging contest before, anybody could really just bring it to a calm level. And, I think the junior officer should have taken the lead on it, to be honest.
That's what I was saying the whole video. Like, this is the primary officer. Why is he not taking up a primary position? Damn it.
Yeah. No, I mean, he might have been outranked, but I honestly don't know. Yeah.
I obviously had my opinions on that because I posted that video.
Yeah,
but that's an example of a situation where the officer got too, I don't know, antsy about a situation.
Yeah.
And then exacerbated a problem that was never supposed to be exacerbated.
It was a non-issue that shouldn't have gone anywhere, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And if you can go on a call that is supposed to be relatively simple, short, sweet, and a non-issue, and end up with a $1 million lawsuit at the end of it, wow.
Yeah.
It speaks volumes about the potential for those kind of calls. Which, like I said, they're
fired.
Well, he did.
Oh, he did? Uh-oh.
Yes, I did read somewhere. I can't, for the life of me, quote where it is that I read it, but I do believe that officer has been fired as a result of his actions that night.
I would say that firing is justified in that case. He went way overboard in a situation where he didn't even have to go onto the deck, so to speak. And he definitely made the situation a lot worse. And the pepper spray was too far. Having the gun drawn was too far. I mean, if he's saying it, from where I was sitting, okay, so the license plate was apparently in the back window, but the back window was tinted. I get it, but you have a military officer sitting in the front seat, and it was not a greatly lit gas station island, but just coming around a little bit, you can kind of see his uniform and then approach. And yes, the military officer did have a sidearm strapped to his thigh, just standard for them when they're off base. But, you know, it was kind of, like I said, it was a dick swinging contest. Two idiots going at each other, and it just ended up the wrong way for both of them. I'm sure the military officer probably took some penalty himself for, being an asshole to the cop to begin with. But it definitely didn't help the situation, and Gutierrez did not act in good faith at all throughout the entire interaction.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's all right.
No, I have strong opinions about that whole thing, which is why I made the video and why we're here today to talk about traffic stops versus domestics.
Yep.
So to kind of refocus, the domestics issue, you're going into that, you know that it's a volatile situation. You're prepared for that, so you can kind of prime yourself to be not that, to de-escalate the situation, because that's what you're going there to do. You're not going there to piss someone off even more. You're going into a domestic to de-escalate the situation. That is actively what you're trying to do. And actually, they're quite fun to engage in. I'm not going to lie. As someone who has been the subject, like in a scenario domestic, ooh, it's so much fun. I got to play Judy Gonzalez, who was like this.
Oh, okay.
Absolute fake. No,
okay.
This is a scenario. This is a trading scenario.
Right.
It's a role play trading scenario where we got to make up whatever we wanted, and we got to interact with the exploring officers who were being trained to de-escalate the situation. And you could play it either, yes, I will de-escalate it, or you could play it as, I adamantly refuse, and then at the end of the day, one officer would probably arrest you. But you do typically go on those calls. You hope to, assuming you have the resources, you hope to go on those calls with more than one officer in tow. At least two is preferable. That way you can actually separate the individuals and conversate with them.
I have an excellent story for later, actually, regarding that kind of scenario. But I just hope you took the opportunity to be able to just throw a lamp for the hell of it in that role play.
Oh,
God damn it, Mike!
That's such a good time, and the amount of abuse that you are allowed to throw at the people. Such a good time. I'm having like good flashbacks to my days as a police explorer. Some of the best hours
really
of my life.
Relieving, but at the same time, you kind of feel bad for the other person in the end, and then they're just like, no, that was good. I like that.
Yeah. It's very cathartic.
Yeah, exactly. Cathartic. There's the
word.
But
like I said, you're going into that situation looking to de-escalate the situation. Sometimes you succeed, sometimes you don't, but you're on a more even footing, I would say, with the subject, which is where there's a bigger presence of danger. And when I say even footing, right, you are face-to-face with the person, whereas in a traffic stop, the person is expected not to get out of their car, unless, of course, you're pulling a felony traffic stop, in which case then you have guns drawn. But in either case, you are at a more tactical advantage than the person that you are pulling over at a traffic stop. And that's by design, right? We're pulling up behind the individual. We are positioning ourselves in such a way as to be strategic to not getting shot at, because I actually have a graphic for this. I prepared.
Yeah, sure.
Here.
I am so glad I got this big screen last summer. This is actually working for me being on the other side of the room.
Oh, absolutely, I bet. Okay, so here's your car, right? Can you see my mouse?
Not yet. Okay, there we go. Yep, I've got you.
All right, so say you're an officer, you're coming up behind. You're still in the rear view of the subject who is facing forward this way. So they're at a tactical disadvantage. You know, if they want to assault you, they're going to have to actually turn around in their seat and shoot you, or get out of the car and shoot you. But either way, they're doing a lot more work than you are to actually present a risk to you.
Yeah. Just don't forget to leave that thumbprint on the rear deck lid there.
Exactly. Oh my gosh. So you can pull this either one of two ways when you're initiating a traffic stop. Now, it depends on if you have a secondary officer or not. Like I said, in my department's case, it was typical to have a secondary officer on scene if you could, but you would typically walk up on this side, or you can walk up on this side. Some departments will have the officers walk up on this side at times, just to kind of for officer safety because of the traffic risk here. Personally, I think it's more of a risk from the driver's perspective, or from the driver's side sort of way. If you walk up on the passenger side rather than the driver's side, because if you are right here, typically what my training officer told me to do was to stop right here, right behind where it is that the driver's side could see you, kind of. So they'd have to kind of awkwardly turn this way to actually speak to you like a polite human being. So you would stop right here, right behind their driver's side window. You would kind of teeter back and forth between where their VIN registration, or their VIN is right here on the windshield, and then you would kind of teeter back here, get their registration, walk back to the car, and that's a more safe procedure to go about doing things.
It can be. It has its drawbacks. Like
it does.
Standing behind the door like that basically leaves you blind to what their right arm could be doing. Standing right in front of them, that gives you great vantage point into the car, but again, that gives them less distance to pull a gun around to get you. And if you're standing in front of the rear view mirror there on the door, you get a pretty good view in, but you don't know what's happening around their feet.
Exactly.
And then
it's up to the officer's discretion, whatever it is that they feel is the best way to go about doing things. There's no right or wrong way to stand on a traffic stop. I know it all sounds super semantical, but this is literally what I was taught to do.
I mean, the only wrong way is the one that ends up with you being dead. So
exactly, precisely. So whatever way that you can think of that doesn't get you dead, do it that way.
it's the comfortable way until you end up in the hospital, basically, or the morgue.
Precisely. Yep. All right, I'm going to refocus us a little bit here.
There was another way that got obsoleted. Basically what it was the officer would go around the passenger side and then come around the front of the car to the driver's side. But that was more of a safety measure just to ensure that they wouldn't get struck by traffic walking up to the vehicle on the driver's side initially. But like I said, it got obsoleted because they had too many jerks, I guess you could say, criminals as they were, that would just pound the gas as soon as that officer was right in front.
So Marcin Johnson asked in the chat, is there a standard for police training? And I would have to say it's not so much a standard for all things as it is a toolbox. So different departments have different ways of doing things, and every once in a while you get interaction between departments across states within, the national
basically
body of police officers, cross training essentially, where they train each other, individual departments, in the methodologies that they use, either to refresh them or to give them some pointers on things that they could do that might improve police procedure. It's an ever evolving process. It's never going to be one shoe fits all for the rest of eternity, because let's be honest, police work is very varied. Very varied. No two traffic stops are the same. No domestic calls are going to be the same.
No two calls whatsoever.
Exactly. Even if you're pulling over the same person, even if you're going to a call for a domestic at the same house, they're never going to be the same, because that is the nature of humanities.
Variety is the spice of life. The only constants change that a whole bit, but so I mentioned I had a story there regarding a domestic. So this is during my time with G4S about 6 years back. I was working as an evening guard at, I guess you could say, kind of an inner city medical center, sort of like urgent care clinic kind of deal. And so this was in my first week there, full-time. I'd been there on weekend spots for about the previous 7 months, and then they brought me on as the full-time guy, and for like a month straight, I was 7 days a week and just crying for like a relief guard to take my weekends. And so early in that first week, though, the owner of the building was having the carpeting redone. So the guys were there till 1 a.m., and then I would have to let them out, shut the whole place up, and go home. And so on the second night, I was standing out there with the carpenters. They were on a quick break. This is about 1 a.m. They ended up going till 3 that night. And just having a smoke. And all we can hear behind us from the building across the street is just all this glass breaking, shouting. All of a sudden, a dog comes running out the front of the 3-story walk-up and just starts tearing around the parking lot. And I'm like, oh, great. I'm going to be here till 5 a.m. doing paperwork. So I call 911, DRPS. They come down. I told them silent, no lights, and one guy didn't get the message. So the couple upstairs, they got tipped off, and you knew they got tipped off because that was when the glass started breaking. Either that or they ran out of glass. But yeah, so they showed up. It had to be about, I want to say about 8 units, including at least 2 supervisors and Ford Explorers. The rest were all marked units. I want to say the Impala's still at the time, but some of them, one of them showed up in the Charger. And so basically they stacked up like SWAT, vest to vest, hand on the shoulder, pat, go. And they went up to the second floor. And then we just hear more glass breaking because it's mostly just the cops stepping on the already broken glass. They said the entire floor was covered. I spoke to them afterwards for the purpose of my report, and they needed my details too. But yeah, so they got in there. Turns out the guy was a biker with a long rap sheet. He wasn't even supposed to be in there. It violated his parole, so he went back to prison. And then the woman, she went for, I believe it was about 2 nights in cells. And then they cut her loose because 2 days later, she was walking around on the property with her dog, which somehow came back. So, fun times.
We're getting a few questions in the chat. I do want to address those.
Sure.
Stuff about standard operating procedure through responding to specific situations. Now, I will say that while there is no 100% standard, right? Because there can't be. You have to be flexible.
Yeah.
Per the nature of the situation, it's always going to be a changing, evolving situation. There are standard, I don't want to say ideas because that doesn't sound verbose enough for what it is that I'm intending to speak up to.
You're basically looking for like a general jumping off point for each call, and then you have to evolve it from there.
Exactly. So if you go on a traffic stop, right, you're stopping behind the person, and you're taking their details, and you're citing them, and you're sending them on their way. Whatever happens in between all of those different steps can vary greatly. And the end result doesn't even have to be sending the person on their way. In the case of some traffic stops, they end up in an arrest or a field sobriety test. And then you have to adjust to that specific set of standards. So you go from a traffic stop to a felony arrest, or you go from a traffic stop to a field sobriety test, or you go from a traffic stop to like just a standard arrest, not a felony arrest, because those are very different things.
It could just turn into like any number of hundreds of things, basically. Literally hundreds.
So you do have to be flexible, but there are specific guidelines for how you would go about operating under these things. You have to make that judgment call in the moment, though, which is what Daniel Crocker did in the Windsor traffic stop. Is he made a judgment call to make it into a felony traffic stop. Probably not the best idea, but that was his judgment call to make, and they cited the reasons for doing such, and there you go. That's what happened. Now, what I will say is that you can make a judgment call, and then you can also backtrack it. Like what I stated in my video is true. You can initiate a felony traffic stop and then back it down to just a regular old traffic stop. Because
de-escalation,
exactly, de-escalation. It's such an important part of police procedures, to be able to understand how to de-escalate a situation effectively. It is a tool that I feel doesn't get used nearly enough. And a lot of that reasoning is because people are super nervous. People are super on edge nowadays. People don't know what to expect when they're interacting with police, and police don't know what to expect when they're interacting with individuals.
Yeah.
The climate of policing has become so incredibly dangerous for both sides as a result of media exacerbation of what the problem is.
Exactly. There's a good one.
People
right there.
are being told that the enemy is on the other side and that they are going to kill them.
Mm-hmm.
And that puts everyone on edge.
Yeah,
Cops and subjects alike, unfortunately.
Yeah, like that's what's getting lost in the in basically just the media propaganda campaign against the police these days, is that the police departments are a life-saving organization, not a life-taking organization. The pistols on the hips, the rifles in the cars, they're for your protection, not theirs necessarily. So basically, that's the problem with a lot of the media going out there and saying, "Oh, don't be black in America. Cops are going to shoot you." That's where the bad name's getting thrown on the cops, and the whole life saving is getting lost. Like that's what's being forgotten. Like even with SWAT. SWAT was originally created in the '60s to save lives in higher risk situations where patrol officers just aren't going to cut it.
Because they're highly volatile situations, highly dangerous situations, one that need a little bit more tactical training. And
not only that, with SWAT, you got the crisis negotiation trainers, and these guys get taught first aid, how to handle canines, how to rappel from a helicopter or from a rooftop. They
get specialized training beyond the scope of what a normal police officer would get.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah. Yep. It's actually funny. Not funny, but funny, haha. It's just ironic. I was watching an episode of, if you've ever seen it, it's a TV show called The Rookie with Nathan Fillion, and he plays a 40-year-old rookie cop.
Oh.
Which, and all the hilarity that ensues. No, he kind of had a midlife crisis after a bank robbery and decided he wanted to help people by saving lives and being an aid to the community, essentially. But that's not why I brought it up. I brought it up because in that episode, one of the training officers, gets a new probationary officer.
Right.
Which, if you're unfamiliar with the way that officer hiring on goes, an officer gets hired to a police department. At least this was the case for me. I don't know how it is across all states, but
it's about the same.
For my department, you get hired on by the department after you take the test, go through the interviews, and then they send you off to police academy for is it 6 months or is it 9 months? I want to say it's 6 months.
I believe up here it's a year they get sent to Ontario Police College, but they may have extended it due to recent events.
It's been a minute since I brushed up on this information because I haven't been looking to be a cop in 4 years.
Yeah. It used to be they handled everything at the police college, and then in the late 90s they came up with, up here it's called the Police Foundations course, or PFP. So you spent about 2 academic years in that, so 16 months. And then if you got hired on, then they'd send you down to OPC, just out in Elmer here, about a half hour outside of where I live. My grandmother's buried there, by the way, so I get a great view of the college going up and back every time I go to see her grave. And anyway, so you spend, I want to say it's about 6 to 10 months there, and then they put you in the field with an FTO as a probie, or probie 1 probie if you want to get Star Warsy with it.
No, P1. Essentially, you are a baby cop, and you get a year or so as a probationary officer, during which time you can get fired for any reason. Anyway, so this TO was training this new probie, and this probie was ex-military, and she was having a troubling time readjusting to civilian life after being in a war zone for so long. Because overseas, when you are working in that kind of a way, everyone's an enemy. You're not thinking of people as people that you're there to help. More so, you're thinking about them as the enemy, there to kill you, potential threats. And transitioning back from that after being in that way for so long is a transition, a hefty one. So he was having trouble, well, not having trouble, but he was making efforts, the TO, to transition her back to civilian life, and she was having such a struggle with that.
Right.
Whereas the previous TO that he had, or not previous TO, previous probie that he'd had, needed to understand how to risk assess as a cop, because they were very open to the world, and the world was all gumdrops and rainbows, and it wasn't super threatening, etc., etc. The importance of why I'm bringing this up, right, is because I think that the current day climate, how we frame police and civilian interactions, has turned it from police helping out who is supposed to be their neighbors, right? Their fellow civilians, their fellow Americans. It's turned from that into, I don't want to like exactly compare it to like what our troops have to go through over in Afghanistan and stuff, but it has become
about as close as you get.
It's about as close as someone can get on this side of the sea, right? It's it's contentious. It's iffy. It can be hostile. It's a war zone in some cases. I mean, we just got done with last year's riots and all of the news coverage that entailed. And we've seen firsthand exactly what happens when contentions between civilians and police officers get too out of whack. And because of that, I think because of the current climate, what used to be just a regular old day traffic stop has turned into something more in the minds of the people involved in those traffic stops, because they're thinking to themselves, okay, what's going to happen? Are they going to kill me? On either side.
Yeah. I mean, even before the recent riots, before Freddie Gray, before Michael Brown, before all that, I mean, you could go back even into the 60s, the 50s, and, you know, police officers would still have that same kind of tension walking up to a car wondering, is this the one that's going to turn around and pop me? You know, it's really in the last, I'd say 30, 40 years where it's felt more dangerous than it did, say, back in the 50s, because, you know, there's a lot more illegal weaponry on the streets, you know, being obtained by gangs who steal from, you know, legal gun owners, whatnot, rub off the serial numbers, modify the weaponry in such a way that it becomes even more dangerous. I mean, like taking an AR-15 and putting like a full auto kit in it, like that's basically something the gangs will do, according to some people I've talked to in the States and a couple of people here in Canada as well, because we still have a small ability to get AR-15s here right now under Trudeau. But anyway, so the long and the short is, though, with the last 40 years or so, it's just more and more available to get black market weaponry and, you know, just common people carrying guns in daylight that aren't registered. And I think that's kind of where the government needs to focus on the gun bans, not so much the legal gun owners, but people just driving around with the weaponry, like this black market weaponry. That's what the police are more cautious about. They're worried, okay, this guy looks like a gangbanger. Maybe he has an illegal gun. I can't speak to it unless I have some reason to go into the vehicle. So there are certain amounts of danger involved with that, but it's just with them walking up to the car. They wonder, what am I going to find on the other side of that window?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, it could be a crapshoot.
Yeah. Just to kind of shift it over to domestic for a moment, because we haven't really touched much on the domestics. You know, with the vehicles, and I was kind of talking to a few people in the Discord last night about this post-show, trying to get ready for this. And we were talking about how, like, with the cars, you know, there's windows all the way around, but they only cover from about the shoulders up, right? Mm-hmm. So you're only seeing, like, about a third of the picture. You don't know what's in the car. You just see at least one person behind the wheel. But with a domestic abuse call, like we said before, you know, the tensions are already high. Barbara's thrown a goddamn lamp at Michael. Yeah, she's just going to town. You know, the dog's running out the door. I know, right? She's such a, oh God, I mean, she owes me $50, but anyway. Yeah. So
that
anyway,
goddamn property line.
Yeah. So anyway, you know, with the domestics, you got windows, but they could have drapes over them. They could have blinds over them. The door could be open a crack, or it could be open all the way, or it could just be completely shut and nobody's answering. And you don't know if you're going to find a body on the other side or some asshole with a shotgun in wait. Mm-hmm. There's just all kinds of things you can find on the other side of that door, but you don't know until you knock. And that's why the officers, they'll stand to the sides, lean in to knock, and then lean in to speak at the door jam, because they don't want to get their head blown off when that buckshot comes flying through the hole.
Mm-hmm. To that point about the lack of visibility, I will say that a lot of vehicles do have window tint that make it more difficult to actually see through the windows as well.
That's another factor,
That's another factor that contributes. Regarding domestics, can I help you? Regarding domestic, well, she's been here for a while. She's
trying to be a Barbara.
Yeah, goddamn it, Barbara. So regarding domestics, in some cases, actually, depending on the situation, obviously, because of course that's I feel like that goes without saying in police work. But at times there were moments when during domestics I have watched officers, instead of park at the residence, they park a few houses down from the residence and walk up on it from different opposite sides of the house, maybe approach it from different vantage points depending on what they're hearing, what's going on.
We call that the element of surprise.
Yes. Not just necessarily approaching the door from opposite sides of the door, but also from opposite sides of the house in some occasions. If you have enough officers, why the hell not, right?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. But once you are actually inside of the house, you do have a little bit more, I don't want to say flexibility, but also risk, because a lot more of you is exposed because you are in the same space as them, as opposed to the traffic stop where they're in the car, you are not.
Yeah, you're out there and they have all the cover, and all they got to do is just lean out and boom, boom, boom.
There's more face-to-face interaction there. Exactly. They can jump you more easily if they are already just right in front of you. But of course, that's an aspect that would be involved with literally any other call where you're face to face with an individual. The element that makes it more dangerous in this case is because the individuals themselves are volatile, typically with each other, but they can turn their attentions on you. But the fact that their attentions are not turned on you, as opposed to a traffic stop where you are getting a full brunt of their pissiness that evening, makes the situation different.
Yeah, the pissy ones are definitely the worst ones to deal with. I can attest to that.
Yeah, there's no guarantee that in a domestic dispute, the people involved in the domestic dispute are going to turn their attention on their hostilities onto the officers attending them.
They can, but it depends on the people.
Likely, I feel.
Yeah. It's really more whether or not the people on the other side of the door are amenable to law enforcement, whether they know they screwed up and, they need to shut up, quiet down, or if they know that, their savior has arrived. He did it. Get him. That kind of deal.
They are perfectly willing to help you in the whole situation with whatever it is that they can.
And again, the media,
they're definitely more cooperative in some cases, especially if they were the ones that called you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Again, that's where the media kind of sours the view of the police and just makes the situation worse in that sense. So I did have some links.
Yes.
Just it was more speaking to statistics on domestic disputes and
statistics.
Well, it's just more in terms of it was basically the ones that would kind of back my argument. I have to reopen Discord actually to send them to you.
Yeah, no problem. Yep. I have a few statistics myself.
Sure. You go first.
Okay.
That'll give me time to send.
Give me a moment to pull them up again.
Sure.
And I made them all nice and pretty for you.
Okay. Yep.
And there is the link to that PDF specifically.
Yes, the Bureau of Justice. I did see that actually earlier when I was looking some things up.
Yeah. So this is a graph about the sheer frequency of these interactions. Now, I already quoted this statistic 53.4 million different interactions or reason for contact with police officers in any year. Specifically, I chose 2015 because of a different statistic that I wanted to compare it against. But in 2015, of the 53.4 reasons for contact, 19.2 of those were driver during traffic stop related contact. Right. And the contact that we're looking for, that we care about relating to domestics, I think would be reported possible crime and reported non-emergency crime. And while both of these combined do equate to more than the driver during traffic stop statistic, it should be noted that reported possible crime and report on non-crime emergency, those also include things like medical emergencies, traffic accidents that were witnessed by the respondent, asking for directions, custody enforcement, court orders, and non-emergency situations. And all of that is available on the Bureau for Justice Statistics website. I can link these in the description after we're done here.
Yeah. I did do 3, by the way, there. So, yeah, whenever you get a chance for those later, by all means.
I will definitely pull those up. Just
my Dissenter browser just decided to pop a bunch of these in the weirdest places, and okay, yeah, there we go.
Right. So this is the reason why I chose the 2015 statistic. The average annual number of victimizations from 2006 to 2015, 1.3 million victimizations on average annually in terms of domestic violence. Only about 36% of those being serious violence, which includes rape and sexual assault, robbery, and aggravated assault.
I'm just looking for the 36%. Where are we?
I did that math based off of this number, the serious violence number here, divided by this number here.
Right. Okay. I was just looking at the percentages on the right there, and I couldn't see anything in the 30s, to be honest. It's all halfway point, and it's like, oh, geez, that's awful.
Yeah. The next statistic that I wanted to bring up was from 2019. Of the 48 officers that were feloniously killed, in the green, these are all related to vehicle-related incidences. So 6 were specifically traffic stops. Oh, sorry. 2 were vehicular pursuits, and 3 were involved in vehicular pursuits. Those 2 were while assisting other law enforcement officers, and the 3 were while not assisting. I'm not entirely sure why they separated those out, but it is what it is. But of those 48, 2 were responding to disturbances, specifically disorderly subjects, fights, etc., and 1 was responding to a domestic violence call. So obviously, in 2019, it was more dangerous to go on a traffic violation stop than it was to go on a domestic stop.
Yeah.
And then right here, in terms of initial purposes for traffic stop by physical resistance encountered, this is specific to North Carolina. We can actually see that, officer encountered physical force can happen even when you're not in a felony stop. So that can happen while you're at a checkpoint, driving while impaired, investigation, another motor vehicle violation, which is just kind of the etc. pile of things.
Going into the safety zone, so to speak.
Exactly. A safe movement violation, seatbelt violation, speed limit violation, stoplight sign violation, vehicle equipment violation, vehicle regulatory violation. Not all of these are not necessarily primed to be a risky encounter, but we get 3,014 in the year 2019 in North Carolina, just North Carolina, where there was physical resistance encountered.
Well, I'm not going to Myrtle Beach anytime soon. No, I love how you have this all Crowder style with the link there too. That's good for notating later too.
And I will say, though, I also found this, and it was interesting. And the reason why I bring it up is because I found it interesting. Domestic violence reduction units. It seems that we understand that domestic disputes can be volatile and that they're intricate and there's a lot that goes into them. And a lot of agencies and I did not get a a what do you call it? A graphic of this because I copied and pasted it, but it's also I will post this in the chat. But 90% of local departments serving 250,000 like resident communities have a specialized domestic violence unit with full-time personnel as of 2013, which what that means is they're something akin to this model, where in a section of the General Investigations Unit, which is the unit that generally handles investigations, go figure, it deals specifically with crimes related to domestic violence, and this is specific to Illinois, but of course it's probably to some degree similar across the board in other states as well. So these crimes that fall under domestic violence tend to be familial, dating, or cohabitation, and they not only investigate but also assist the victims of these instances. So they're more specialized units intended to specifically help in such cases. Whereas traffic stops is kind of crapshoot. So
yeah, I'm just looking at this and I'm thinking to myself, Aurora, Illinois. I'm hoping these guys never had to go to Wayne and Garth's house. Yeah.
All right, I'm going to pull up the 3 links that you sent me.
Yeah, they are mainly just articles. There are some statistics involved, but yeah, they mostly just cite that, they go into very specific statistics. I'm not sure if they're nationwide or statewide. I didn't get a chance to do more than just glance through them. The headlines were kind of right for what I was looking for, and some of them I did get through, but not all.
Well, we could take a quick gander at them. Are there any specific parts that you would like me to highlight?
Not specifically. Pick and choose.
Okay.
Ladies' choice.
The most dangerous calls for police domestic disturbances in 2017. Let me just expand this so that people can read better. According to the FBI, domestic disturbance calls lead about 14% of officer deaths every year. A slew of recent events has put a spotlight on the dangers of responding to such calls for Men in Blue. Justin Yeo in October is one such heartbreaking story. In another incident, Chester, Illinois, a police officer suffered a serious head injury while investigating a domestic disturbance case. Wow, Midwest, what the fuck are we doing?
I have no idea, but it's the same as everywhere else, I think.
So the article is quoted saying, most of the time officers aren't sure of the dangers that lie within the walls of a troubled home. Since the suspects are on their turf, their familiarity works against the police. The high emotional quotient and volatile, unpredictable nature of people involved make these situations risky for officers. Volatile, I'll give them that. Unpredictable, I feel like traffic stops also have that element to them as well.
They do, yeah. I will give you that.
The high emotional quotient, I feel like we're on a more even playing field nowadays because of things that we touched on earlier regarding the nature of police work as it is in current year.
Current climate,
The climate is nerve-wracking, to say the least. It's one of the reasons I saw the tide turning, and that's one of the reasons why I neglected to go into law enforcement myself, is because I personally did not want to subject myself to the current political climate as an officer and deal with all of that.
That does actually steer me on to one article I saw earlier that I didn't link. It talked about, basically it was more about life insurance as a police officer. And they said the 8 leading causes of death were these 7 other things, and the last one was on-the-job injuries and, incidents. So they had stuff like obesity, high cholesterol, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, but officer on-the-job injuries and stuff was all the way at the bottom. It was number 8. It was the last one. So, but I can see where you're going with it, because, I mean, the job can lead you to many negative things, and I have actually seen quite a few of my friends who became police officers and just what it did to them over time. And it kind of goes back to what you were talking about with the veteran who came back from overseas. And, she was still in her head where, she was going to get shot at daily and tried to go to a job where she could get shot at daily. Yeah. But was trying to readjust, and the FTO was trying to help her into it. So it's kind of along that same line where policing brings a specific kind of stress into your life, just as, being in a war zone is. And, both of them can take you down some really dark roads.
Mm-hmm.
So I can understand why you didn't want to get into the field. And, either way, I understand the decision.
Yeah, there's also more money in computer engineering, software engineering.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, somebody actually brought up a good question on Officer Tatum's stream earlier. He was streaming the Chauvin verdict.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I keep saying Chauvin because in Canada we've got a French province, and we're basically raised French as a second language in the schools. But it's Chauvin. But anyway, so somebody raised a question in his chat. Do you see more police officers going into the security industry to get away from policing because of the way the media is spinning the police and how cities are defunding and throwing their cops under the bus? And, he brought up the very, very valid point that police officers make tens of thousands of dollars a year, whereas security guards like myself, we're minimum wage. Like here in Ontario, we're like $14 an hour, and that's only up $3 from about 7 years ago when I started.
It depends on the location that you're policing in. I know that
location,
in Chicago,
level.
the wage salary, there we go, salary of a police officer is vastly inferior to that of a suburban police officer.
I mean, Emmanuel Rom and Lori Lightfoot are not giving them a raise anytime soon for hazard pay. I can definitely tell you that for sure.
Nope. So this article that you sent me does also touch on the specialized domestic violence training for such disputes, involves lessons on how to deal with stress and unknown factors, includes possible issues plaguing the people concerned involving serious mental conditions. Now, while we did get training for making felony traffic stops and traffic stops in general,
mm-hmm.
there wasn't a whole lot of specialized training for traffic stops.
Yeah, that's usually the academy they do that with, because that'll be part of the shoot house training, generally speaking.
What I mean by specialized training is, have you ever heard of active listening?
Oh yes, definitely.
So when I was at state and national competitions, one of the scenarios that we get tested on is actually barricaded subject negotiations, and typically this is what happens when a wellness check, or perhaps a barricaded subject or hostage negotiation is kind of in the same ring of things. They're not the same, but they are similar in that the goal is to get everyone out of a building, de-escalate a situation, and do it all without pulling your red man gun. Mm-hmm. Essentially. The purpose of them is to actively listen to the individual who is highly volatile, who is who's on edge, who is at their breaking point. They are at their worst, and a lot of the interaction with them is trying to get them to calm down, connect with them on a more personal level, get them to release the hostages and give themselves up if it's a barricaded subject negotiation. Don't kill yourself.
No, but it's basically reverse Stockholm syndrome. Yeah, like you're basically trying to get the criminal on your side and basically get everyone in there out of
trust you, get them to form a sort of kinship with you so that you can help them, get them to a more reachable level. So that then we can continue this conversation behind a safely padded cell or whatever. You get that training. And it's similar to what would go on in a specialized domestic violence training, because you are actively listening to the individuals, you are de-escalating the situation, you are becoming more friendly with them, you are getting them to take a load off, relax a little bit. I feel like it could be beneficial to actually more widely give this to officers just handling everyday calls as well, because a large portion of what it is that officers are doing on a daily basis is interacting with the public. Typically it's with the public on their worst of days, and if they had the correct tools to kind of bring them off that ledge a little bit, safety could go up. Interactions with police officers could be better, improved. Nervousness around police could be lessened. You don't get that for a traffic stop. You get that for domestic violence training. You don't get that for a traffic stop.
No.
And it probably could have done Joe Gutierrez a little bit of good.
He still
Daniel Crocker a lot of bit of good. He would have had he would have still had his job. Daniel Crocker would not be on the fast track to a world of hurt.
Yeah.
And
I'm actually reminded of an episode of Flashpoint. It was a TV show that was filmed here in Canada from 2009 to 2013. Great show if you can find it. It aired in the States on CBS. Hugh Dillon from the Headstones, the lead singer, played the lead role. Constable Ed Lane, I should say. And in this one episode, he turned to David Petkow. I know the girls are drooling right now because David Petkow, total dreamboat. But anyway, he turns to David Petkow and he says, in this job, you're catching people in the worst moment of their lives. And if they don't have you, what have they got?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I think in that moment, Joe Gutierrez dropped the soap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this article was posted in 2016, updated 2019, and it is the Cleveland Metro's "What are the most dangerous situations for police? 6 takeaways from a new report." Excuse me.
Almost went back to your Bubba Wallace video for a moment there.
I know, right?
Yeah, love that one, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Earlier in the week, the Law Enforcement Memorial Group released a 2016 tally of police officer deaths through July 20th that showed an 8% rise in killings over the previous year, and then a 78% spike in firearm-related fatalities over the same period in 2015. Of particular concern, ambush-style killings of law enforcement officers have dramatically increased, more than 300% from the same period in 2015. 14 officers were shot and killed in ambushes, 7 officers were killed stopping a suspicious person, and 5 officers were killed while executing a tactical arrest or high-risk warrant. Okay, so not that we don't care, but where is it that we care about this?
Of the 91. Third one down, third bullet.
Okay. Of the 91 police officers who were killed while responding to dispatch calls, the highest proportion, 22%, died responding to domestic disputes.
And right below it,
officers who died after initiating contact with suspects were found most likely to be killed during traffic stops.
It kind of goes to both our points.
I know, right?
Yep. Common ground.
I guess.
I mean, obviously not. We're kind of standing on the graves there, but you get the idea.
A little bit.
Yeah. Shouldn't have gotten so happy about it. Damn it, I did it again.
Of the 684 nationwide deaths that were examined, 272 were traffic related. These included officers killed in automobile crashes, motorcycle crashes, and incidents when they were struck by vehicles. Yeah, so you don't have to just worry about the person that you're pulling over, but you got to worry about everyone else.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, you could have sleeping drivers, you can have drunk drivers, and they'll just go right through the safety zone if they're not looking. But yeah.
Yeah. All
so
right.
that would kind of go to your traffic stop bit, but yeah.
It would. And then, was there anything else from this article that you wanted to touch on?
I believe that was it. Just those 2 points that just kind of went to both our arguments.
Okay. And then this last one from Desert News in 2020. Despite training, domestic abuse calls remain the most dangerous for police. It's the thing that keeps us awake at night, the thing that wakes us in the cold sweat. I don't think
up one. Sorry.
Up one. It's the type of call for help that is so common and almost always a part of every patrol officer's daily routine. And yet domestic violence calls are also the stuff of nightmares for those hoping to help and those willing to answer the plea.
Well, hoping for help, but yeah. Close enough.
The 2 most dangerous situations for police officers are traffic stops and domestic violence calls, according to the FBI.
Again, it goes to both. Yep.
I'm looking for. I don't want to say something substantial because I want to discount people's lived experiences with this stuff, but I'm looking for something more substantial. Damn it!
I love how they threw in the domestic violence line there too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just threw that.
If you see anything that would be super helpful to me.
I think that's about it in the article. Yeah, then they get the links about George Floyd and other things. So,
Fun. Okay, so coming down to the wire here, last 15 or so minutes. I didn't really think past this point because we've touched on a lot. We've touched on methodologies, ways to kind of improve, or ways that, at least in my training, we were taught to handle certain situations regarding these two scenarios. We've touched on the statistical relevances regarding these two incidents or these two scenarios as well. Touched on our own background experiences with this. Is there anything else that we're missing in terms of touching?
Well, geez, I didn't know you were that friendly, but
no, I had to make a joke.
I watch side quests too much. What can I say?
Morrison Johnson in the chat. What are some criticisms you have of current approach to police interactions? So we did discuss. I don't know if
Joe Gutierrez. We did
briefly. Joe Gutierrez. Yeah. No, but I was thinking.
Such a dick.
Not specifically, but more broadly, the issue regarding Joe Gutierrez is that it was a Holly. It was made all the more volatile by the current climate. I think that a lot of what drives policing nowadays is less about actually protecting and serving the community and more through fear, unfortunately. We are entering into a new age of fear-based community policing.
I'm thinking the second Louis back-talking and being less than compliant also didn't help the situation, but two wrongs don't make it.
No, two wrongs don't make it right, and it is the officer's duty to be above reproach. They are a representative of something greater than themselves, right? Sure. Nazario himself was also supposed to be a representative of something greater than himself, but I don't care about him right now, right? We're talking about policing and not the military.
And that cat is not helping.
She's so distracting.
She's on
the desk. So, as an officer of the law, you are supposed to strive to be more excellent. That sounds pretentious, but I genuinely think you have to set an example for your community of how to be, of how to interact, of how to handle things. That is your duty as an officer. You shouldn't be the one getting pulled over, shouldn't be the one getting fired for a little bit of excessive force. You shouldn't be the one who is doing the excessive force or losing his shit in the middle of a scenario. You, like I said, have to be beyond reproach.
Yeah,
you have to
want to become an example for the rookies.
Leveled, graceful.
Yeah.
All right, you can stumble, sure.
Yeah.
But dear God, don't do it on like 6 different vantage points with recording and audio. Just
I mean, you can't really avoid that these days. Everybody's got a cell phone camera now.
You really can't. And then, of course, we have police cams that I actually, you know what? Excuse me. I do think that it should be more of an initiative to standardize having cameras, body cams on officers for the protection of the officer so that they can actually, film the scenario going on, not just whenever it is that the thing is going. It looks bad if you are arresting anyone, if you just see them throwing someone up to the ground and handcuffing them and yelling at them. Right? That looks bad. But if you have the 2 minutes prior to whatever the hell happened, that context is important. And I think that in order to protect what it is that law enforcement stands for, it is within their best interest to invest in body cams that are always on, not necessarily always recording, but you can, backtrack about like 2 minutes to get the fuller context of what's going on.
Yeah.
Because obviously recording all of the time, that is a ton of data.
It is.
Oh my God.
It actually reminds me of the Nick Sandman incident about 1.5 years ago in Washington there. For those that aren't familiar, Nick Sandman was the kid in the MAGA hat in Nathan Phillips' face, and, he was having the smile. That picture, that launched so much hate against the poor kid, and he ended up countersuing, or he ended up suing CNN with the help of L. Lynn Wood.
They did just settle that, I believe.
Yep.
Was it a quarter million? Okay.
It was a quarter, yep. Well, them and I believe the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post was also sued just as much. But the thing of it is, that day, they only aired on CNN 40 seconds of that interaction. It was just Nick Salmon smiling at Nathan Phillips, who, by the way, is a professional crisis actor, I might add. He actually showed up in a Skrillex music video, too, strangely enough. But, yeah, no, seriously. If you see a native guy sitting on a doorstep in one of Skrillex's videos, that's him.
Interesting.
But anyway, so they only showed that 40 seconds, but there was a whole, something like 20 minutes of interaction there that was unseen. Basically what happened was, Nick Sandman and his fellow students from Covington Catholic, they showed up for the March for Life in D.C. at the same time as, I believe, the Women's March. And so they were to meet up at the Lincoln Memorial to get their bus back. They showed up an hour early, but at the time, there were some Black Hebrew Israelites protesting against some Native Americans that were there.
Bread and butter.
Yeah, I know, right? So anyway, but the thing is that the Black Hebrew Israelites start yelling at the kids, and with the Covington Catholic school kids, their spirit chant was like the Atlanta Braves in '92. They would do the chop and go, oh. So anyway, so in order to counter the Black Hebrew Israelites, yelling at them, they asked their chaperones, hey, can we do the school spirit chant? So I think it might not have been the greatest foresight, but hello, Native Americans right there who might find it offensive. So anyway, Nathan Phillips and the rest of the Native Americans, they start coming over, and the kids are thinking, oh, they're coming over here to show support for us. They think these guys are harassing us, which they are, and they want to help us. So anyway, but then Nathan Phillips gets right up in Nick Salmon's face, banging his drum, breathing his tobacco mouth all over the poor kid. And I've heard he chews tobacco. I'm just kind of throwing that assumption out there. But anyway, so that was the snapshot heard around the world, was Nick Sandman smiling at Nathan Phillips until he realized, oh, wait, this guy's singing a song against me in his native language that I don't understand. Maybe I shouldn't be smiling anymore. But CNN didn't put that up. So that's where we're going with the context matters, obviously, with the body cams and whatnot. And it definitely speaks to the recent Chauvin trial, because last year, all you were seeing was the cell phone footage of Chauvin's knee across George Floyd's back on his shoulders, which is what I was trained in use of force as well myself. And then they got the 20 minutes of body camera footage from one of the other officers that showed everything leading up to Chauvin even showing up on the scene, to the 8 minutes, 46 seconds across his shoulder. And there's where the context matters, because then it gave a use of force expert a chance to testify and say, that's not on his neck. It's across his shoulder blade where it's supposed to be.
Yes. Context matters, people. Believe it or not. That's where that is all headed towards, that argument. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat. I'm trying to gauge what good questions we have from the chat, because I don't know about you, Bob, but I like to interact with my audience.
Oh, me too. Now, trust me, when I'm on my Twitch stream, I'm always looking at the chat off to my left, and I'm just looking for anybody to show up, honestly. I do get a few people that show up, though.
So, Marcin Johnson in the chat with all of these fantastic questions asks, who's responsible for storing, encrypting, and managing that data, which speaks to, of course, chain of custody and whether or not these are admissible videos in court.
I love how you bring that up on the screen, too.
Yes, you can do that. You can just click on it. Just there you go. And I always forget to do it, but it's super helpful when I do remember. So I'll put it back on the screen. Personally, I don't know what happens with the chain of custody and the encrypting of that data specifically. I can tell you from a perspective of someone who works with software and computers and a lot of film, believe it or not. And so, someone who does YouTube as a side hustle, as a hobby.
Right.
There are likely servers
there are
where that data gets streamed like directly. Those cameras are likely not, I guess, accessible by the officers in such an easy way, so as to protect the data on those cameras.
They're very tamper-proof. The only button the officer really has access to is the start
the start recording button.
Yeah, and it will record 30 seconds prior to that button press of video, and just keep replacing it with the previous 30 seconds up until that button is pressed, and then it engages audio. And depending on the camera that they get, it can either beam directly back to a server room at the precinct where it's stored, or the officer will turn it in at the end of shift, and it'll be plugged in, and it'll be automatically downloaded while it's charging.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking was the procedure for that. But regarding the actual management of the data itself, like who sets up those servers, who maintains those servers, who has access to them. And I'm of the impression, I have absolutely no knowledge of this because I've never looked into it, actually, believe it or not. My best assumption, and yes, I'm making an ass out of myself and everyone else here, is that they are set up by third parties. The access is highly restricted to a select number of individuals with clearance for that access. The encryption is probably definitely handled third party as well, because let's be honest, no police department has an in-house software developer branch. No. I don't think so.
No, I'd say you're wording it perfectly so far. I'm not hearing anything that sounds wrong. So,
the chain of command regarding who has access to that is, I don't want to say handled necessarily solely in-house, but it'd probably be like the chief, a couple higher level officers, like maybe
commissioner, captains, stuff like that.
The watch commander, essentially. The mayor.
Maybe not the mayor. No,
maybe not the mayor?
No. That would be outside of a chain of custody circle.
Well, they'd have the ability to actually demand access. I mean, not demand access, but demand it get released to view specifically.
Yeah.
Like they have that pulling power.
Yeah, it would still involve a judge and a warrant at some point, regardless. But I believe like a member of a city council or a standing mayor would still have to go through a judge to get a warrant to say, hey, I need to take a look at this. I need to see what my officers are doing. But within the police chain of command, though, it would go the chief and the commissioner, because the commissioner would be above the chief to an extent, and then maybe one or two levels below, at least down to captain at the very least, just for the purpose of reviewing during a shift.
So, Morrison Johnson, what happens if the system goes down? Backup battery. If they're probably solid state drives that they're stored to rather than the rotating hardwares, because those do have a risk of being easily deleted if magnetized in a way that you don't want them to.
Depends on the shielding.
It does, yes. But I would assume that they do have a backup battery so that there is a constant stream of that data, so that there isn't any interruption. They would have safeguards in place in the event that the network goes down or that the power goes out, that data is stored. Now, of course, if all shit hits the fan and everything fails, and
somebody sets off an EMP.
Exactly. What are you gonna do? Shit's out of luck.
Yeah. They're just gonna have to go with the eyewitness reports at that point, and that may not be the most reliable, as we learned from Michael Brown.
Precisely. So we are down to the 60 plus seconds here. I don't want to take it too much longer than an hour and 30 minutes because Mama's got to sleep at some point. But Bob, did you have anything that you wanted to say last minute or shill to the audience? Now's your time.
Okay, so you guys can find me at twitch.tv/CreatorBob, all one word, all lowercase. I believe it is linked below.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And just one more thing, just on behalf of all the side quest fans, Weebo. I had a note up all day telling me not to say Weebo. Rat corrected me about this last night.
You're fine.
Okay, so anyway, but on behalf of all the Side Quest fans, welcome back. Thank you for coming back. The community has missed you. Magog missed you, and it's great to have you back. It's just excellent to have the childish brat back. That just it balances everything out. It balances out Ark's snootiness and Spooky. Well, I wouldn't say bitchiness, but it's a fun bitchiness with Spooky, and I know Mort's definitely happy to see you back because it balances out her cat cuteness as well.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, just everybody in general is happy to have you back. So welcome back.
Thank you. It's good to be back. So guys, thank you so much for being here for this last hour and a half. Hope you guys had a good time, learned a lot, maybe, take it elsewhere, do with it what you will, hate on it. I don't care. Do what you want. Thank you so much to all those who commented, who liked, who shared, who subscribed, to myself and Bob. All of his links are in the description if you would like to check him out. And, of course, my links are in the description as well if you would like to check any of my shenanigans out. This has been a fantastic experience, a fantastic discussion, and I'm so pleased that we organized this. Thank you, Bob.
You're welcome. Mm-hmm. Thanks for having me.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.